Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Force here once again with some more Elder Scrolls Online footage. I've got about 20 minutes of gameplay to show you today. Now this footage is actually coming from the live stream event done this afternoon at Quakecon. It was a 30-minute live stream, but there was just a little bit over 10 minutes of stage time, both before and after the gameplay presentation. So I've just cut out that stage time and we'll just be showing you the raw footage of the gameplay itself. What I'd like to do, beyond walking you through the footage and sort of telling you what's going on, I also just want to give you my general thoughts and impressions on the gameplay presentation. Obviously, as you can see here, we're starting off with a little bit of a look at character creation. They go through this very, very quickly. They don't take much of an in-depth look at it. I think because they know, as great as character creation is and as important as it is, I think they know that most people just really wanted to see some gameplay. They wanted to see the game in action. So here we go. We're going to be taking a look primarily at the game in first-person perspective, although they do show bits and pieces of the gameplay in third person. I'm not surprised that they decided to do this. Because of their newfound emphasis on, trying to draw in that Elder Scrolls crowd, trying to make sure they know that, hey, you can play this just like you've played other Elder Scrolls games in the first-person view. But as I've touched on in the past, the best way to play in terms of optimal awareness and being helpful to your group in PvP and like dungeon scenarios will be in the third person, just because you have that wider frame of view. You can see more of what's going on around you, so it's easier for you to react. But nevertheless, we're going to be taking a look at a lot of that first person view. I also want to say, before we get too far into this video, that keep in mind that this is a recording of a live stream. The live stream itself was only 720p, and the fact that it's being recorded is going to drop that graphical fidelity down a little bit. So you're going to notice some blotchiness from bitrate issues, essentially, from rendering that took place. So just keep that in mind. If it's a little splotchy in areas, that's the reason why. Because it's a recording of a 720p live stream, it's not going to be crisp and clear as direct capture would be. I don't know if they're going to release any direct capture footage from the live stream, but as of now, this is what we have access to. So we start off just looking at a little bit of walking around. Now they're actually taking a look at the skill system within this game. So the way the skills work is there are these skill lines. You're going to notice those different categories. There's class, weapon, armor, guild, and racial. So you've got your class skills depending on which of the 4 classes that you choose from. But there's so many skill lines. I'm pretty sure it's over 20. It might be close to 30. I think it was either 21 or 31. For some reason, those two numbers are popping into my head. But essentially, there are all these different skill lines for the different classes, for all the different weapons, for the different armors, and then for the different guilds. There's racial skill lines, and then there's like PvP skill lines. Now, what'll happen is you get these skill shards, which give you skill points to spend into those skill lines, and then you can also spend points when you level your character up. But that's how the skill system works in this game. There are character-specific or class-specific skills, but a majority of the skills come from the weapons and the armor and the guilds and the PvP and things of that nature. So essentially, besides those 3 class-specific skill lines as well as the race-specific skill line, everyone else has access to all the same skills, all the different armor skills, all the different weapon skills, all the different guild skills. Everyone has access to that, so it's pretty neat. We also just saw the way shrine system, so that is going to be the fast travel within this game. There will be way shrines scattered throughout the world, and then once you find it, you can then fast travel to it from any location. So there's pros and cons to fast travel. In my opinion, fast travel is good to cut back on the tedious nature of things, but at the same time, I think there is something to be said for having to walk to locations. But that could just be an older mentality that I have from experiencing games that didn't have fast travel, and I think it definitely adds something, but I can see, that huge time investment. People definitely, it's more hardcore, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And prior to the existence of fast travel, it was definitely more of a chore. So I understand why they're deciding to incorporate it. And heck, fast travel system was in Skyrim as well. So maybe they're just trying to hold true to, a lot of players will be coming into this game from Skyrim. For a lot of people, Skyrim was their first Elder Scrolls experience, so it's not surprising that they're going to try to take some of those systems that made the gameplay less tedious and incorporate that here into this game as well. And now we're finally seeing some combat. You just saw a little bit of the first-person perspective action there, and now we're switching to them mounting. That mounting animation, I don't know, the horse just appears, and then, I mean, I guess what else are they going to do? They're going to have the horse ride in from the distance every time you call it. I don't know. I guess I don't really know what other options they have. And it's also pretty standard. I just think for Elder Scrolls fans, it might take them back a little bit because they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't I have to go to the stable to get my horse? It's like, no, this is an MMO. You just call it and it appears out of nowhere. And that's just sort of what happens. So going to be doing a bit of discovery right now. Discovery is an important part of this game. Just walking around and finding things is going to help you level up. And he does find some sort of a book up here as well. I'm actually not entirely sure what the point of this was, except for reading a lore book. So he finds a lore book, The Illusion of Death, added to the library. That's fantastic. And then we get a nice vista view of good old Morrowind. I mean, this is going to bring back, I think, a lot of memories for people. Now, again, keep in mind, this is like 1,000 years prior to when you played Morrowind, but this is the land of Morrowind. There we go. Fantastic. This is a Moondast stone. I think that was the pronunciation that he used. These are buffs. These are buffs. You notice even the constellation taking from Skyrim. So it's essentially that same system of you go to those shrines and you get a particular buff for whatever it is. You can only have one of them active at a time. There you go. So it's generally the same system. Now, the one thing I don't know is if it works just like it did in Skyrim in the sense that it is a permanent buff or if it's just temporary, because during the presentation, he said you get a buff for a certain amount of time. So I don't know. He made it sound, to me at least, like it was just a temporary buff, that it wasn't a permanent thing. But that could be wrong. He could have misspoke, or I could have just misheard him. So what you're going to see now is the looking for group system. So he just found a group of players, and then once you are in a group of players, you can fast travel to anyone within your group. So beyond the waypoint system, which again is used for fast travel, when you're in a group, you can fast travel to your buddies. I think that will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if that system is incorporated within PvP, because I don't know. I think that would just make, again, it's the fast travel. You get like instant reinforcements at any location. I think that'll stink for people who like small scale battles. You know, it's like 2 versus 2 or something. Because if you're ever in a 2v2 situation, if you can fast travel within Cyrodiil, chances are pretty good whoever you're fighting against will just tell their buddies, hey, there's 2 guys over here, fast travel to me, we can kill them. And that would be too bad if that was the case. So we're about to finally go into the dungeon here, but before we do, we're actually moving down into this direction to find a Sky Shard. So a Sky Shard, you collect 3 of these, and in doing so, you unlock a skill point to invest into one of your skill lines. Once again, we talked about those the several skill lines for all the different weapons, the armor, the class, and the race. You collect these Sky Shards that will be scattered throughout the world, and then you're going to use those Sky Shards to get more skills. That's how that works. And here we go, finally into a dungeon. A very exciting time. This is the Fungal Grotto. And the premise of this particular instance of this dungeon, and there are 4 people dungeons. This is the small scale dungeons within this game. The thing is, you're fighting goblins, and then you kill the Goblin King, and then the goblins fight for you. That's basically the general wrap up of what's taking place here. So I think we've got most of the preface stuff out of the way. So now we're actually, again, we're in the dungeon. We're taking a look at the gameplay. Now I'd like to sort of give you my impressions. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to touch on. We're taking a look at the gameplay, once again, primarily in first-person perspective. This first-person perspective, as I mentioned in my prior Elder Scrolls video, is a relatively new thing for this particular game. This game began development 5 years ago. I believe it began in 1997. Okay, so this game was in development for a long time. Prior to them announcing that the Elder Scrolls Online was a thing, it was in development for a good, 4 years? It was primarily made for third person. They began making this in 1997. As far as anyone could tell, you know, the 1997, this was a time where, or 1997, 2007. Could you imagine if they began making this in 97? They began making this in 2007. At the time, MMOs were big. You know, WoW was really ramping up. That was a few years after release. World of Warcraft released in 2004. And this was the big MMO boom. Everyone was super stoked to get into MMO. So they began designing this game at that time. And they were designing this game with the third person in mind. What you're viewing right now, this third person perspective gameplay, this is how the game was in development for several years prior to them even announcing that it existed. So it was just earlier this year that they were even talking about first person not including the hands and arms. So they have just added these first person animations this year. So it's amazing that, first of all, that they even have that playable, the fact that that portion of this game has only been in development for a year. But I need you to keep in mind, this is super important, everything that I just prefaced this point with, the fact that it was in development for so long with the third person in mind, the combat in this game is designed around that. You can't deny it. I mean, this game was in development for so long, solely expected to be played in the first person, with first person wasn't even going to include any arm or weapon animations at all. It was just going to be like, I guess, any other third person MMO. When you zoom into the first person, you just see in front of you, but you don't see any particular animations. So, but the combat was designed for third person, and I think that is why we're seeing a lot of complaints. It seemed like the live stream, and I'm not here to try to beat the drum. I don't want to just, ramp up this narrative here that may or may not be true. It could just be a vocal minority, but there's definitely people saying, oh boy, the combat, I don't know, it doesn't look that great. Well, I think the reason people are saying that is because of the way that the system was designed, and viewing so much of it in the first person when it wasn't designed that way for so many years, yeah, it's not going to be as smooth as, say, Skyrim combat is, for example. And that's not to say that Skyrim combat is amazing, because that's one of the cruxes of that series. People typically complain that the combat isn't that great. But I think that they did a pretty good job with Skyrim's first-person perspective combat, and it's the weightlessness that seems to be the issue that keeps coming up when this game's combat is brought up. And again, I'm not here to beat the drum. I'm not here to try to be a negative Nancy. I just want to just express that point, and I don't think that people are incorrect in stating that, hey, this doesn't look like I expected it to, or I'd hoped it to. But with that said, when it comes to me approaching this game, I think I've decided to approach this game differently than I had initially. A lot of people are always looking for, when's the WoW killer coming out? When are we going to see the game that replaces WoW? And whenever an MMO comes out, and it doesn't replace WoW, because I don't know if that's ever really going to happen, or if it'll happen anytime soon. What I mean by that is, I don't know if there's ever going to be an MMO like that style of MMO, that will get as big as WoW did. WoW hit like a zeitgeist. It just, it did unbelievable things. It just took over. It took on a life of its own within the gaming world, and just the world in general. The fact that there were WoW commercials on television, MMO commercials on television, that the general public went, oh yeah, I know. And even speaking to non-gamers, I bet if you talk to most people, people would recognize, oh, the World of Warcraft, yeah, I know that. I know someone who plays that, yeah. But the point is, and I'm not here to compare the game to WoW, my point is that, MMOs come out and people say, is this going to be the game that dethrones WoW? I don't know if that's going to happen, and I don't know if we should expect that to happen, because that's a ridiculous thing. But I don't think that means games are a failure if they don't do that. And so the way I'm approaching the Elder Scrolls Online now is, I'm not saying, is this going to be the game that everyone's going to leave WoW for? Because everyone who's still playing WoW is going to continue to play WoW, because they do it not just for the gameplay, but also for the community. But is this going to be a game that can do two things? I think this game can do two things wonderfully if they continue to polish it and hopefully improve on the combat. I think that it can provide, although a slightly watered down, it still can provide an Elder Scrolls experience that is interesting for fans of Elder Scrolls games. So having that co-op experience throughout Tamriel, the gameplay is certainly a little bit different. The environment interaction is certainly a little bit different. But you can still experience the world of the Elder Scrolls with your friends. So that is a great experience. I think this game can also potentially provide a different type of MMO experience, especially with the presence of that first-person perspective. People looking for a different MMO, an MMO that isn't like every other MMO out there. And just the presence of that, it keeps coming back to this. I know it's not ideal, and I will continue to tell you that it's not ideal. But first-person perspective at least provides something different from the other MMOs out there. It provides literally a new viewpoint, a new vantage point, if you will, a paradigm shift, a perspective shift, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to phrase it with. It provides something different. And if they can continue to iterate and improve upon that portion of the gameplay, then I think that they'll have something good here. Will it dethrone WoW? Is it going to get 10 million subscribers or whatever their payment model ends up being? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good game. And you know, again, even looking at other MMOs, people say, oh, Star Wars The Old Republic, that's going to dethrone WoW. It doesn't have to. We need to stop looking at MMOs thinking if this doesn't become as big as the World of Warcraft, then it sucks, because that's not the case. You can't do that, because that's ridiculous expectations. And I think for what it is and what it's trying to be, I think that they're definitely continuing to make steps in the right direction. You're going to continue to see people talk about the combat, but I don't know. It is what it is right now. We can only hope that they improve upon it. Do you have suggestions? That's a good question. Do you have suggestions for improvement? Because we can complain and complain and complain and complain, but if we don't have a possible resolution to our complaints, then we're just being annoying. Constructive criticism is more important and more valuable than regular criticism. And even what I'm doing here, even the discussion that I'm having here and the points that I'm raising here, I want this to be a great game. I think it's making steps in that direction. I think it can be a great game, and my complaints are coming from a point of caring, because I care about the Elder Scrolls series, I care about the world, and I'd like to have a fun Elder Scrolls game to play with my friends. And I'd like this to be that. So any complaints that I ever levy against any games, really, because wouldn't it be amazing if every game was amazing? That'd be fantastic, and that's what we hope for. So we're going to hope for the best. We're going to, this is what it is right now. The game's still in beta. It's planned for early 2014 release. That could get pushed back if they feel like they need to do more work on it. But as it is, I am happy with a few things. I'm happy with the first-person perspective. I'm happy that they're taking a different approach to MMOs, because it seems like they are. And I'm happy with the potential. So that's what it is. That's where we are. And those are my thoughts on what we've seen so far. I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I guess that can happen from time to time. Now, at this point, I'd like to toss things over to you guys. You will have conversations in the comment section below regardless, but I'd like to specifically ask you, what do you think of the footage that you've seen? And obviously you can chime in on any of the points that I made. And I'm just one person, and I've got my preconceived notions, and I've got my opinions, and they're not always right. No one's are. So if you feel like anything I've said is incorrect, please let me know. Don't be a douche about it, because constructive criticism is the best kind of criticism. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this gameplay. Hopefully you enjoyed my discussion. And hopefully we have some great conversations in the comment section below, so that this could potentially be a great new experience for Elder Scrolls fans and for MMO fans. Thanks so much for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. And as always, keep watching and keep owning.